Somewhere in upstate New York, January 2007. Casey and Alice stared up at the old hotel. The moon peered through a gap in the clouds, bathing the twisting columns and pointed roofs of the building in a pale, eerie light, glinting on the dozens of tall windows, staring out like unblinking eyes. The wind moaned through the surrounding trees, rattling the bare branches like old bones. The women shivered, their breath billowing in great clouds in the cold night air. The hotel certainly looked haunted, Casey thought to herself. It was like a setting from some old horror movie, the infamous Overlook Hotel from The Shining, perhaps. An old car crunched up the gravel driveway and parked alongside them, its polished black paintwork gleaming in the moonlight. A smartly dressed woman climbed out of the vehicle and hurried towards the hotel, hugging herself to ward off the cold. A huge bunch of keys, all shapes and sizes, jangled in her gloved fist. She gestured for Casey and Alice to follow her. They grabbed their heavy bags and trotted up the steps that led to the hotel's grand front doors. The other woman was fumbling with numb fingers for a large iron key. She unlocked the doors, tugged one slightly open, and urged Casey and Alice inside. They stepped through into the dark shadows beyond the doorway. The smartly dressed woman's face appeared in the gap between the doors behind them. She looked afraid. Her eyes were huge in her pale, pinched face. "We have no guests tonight," she almost whispered, as though fearful that someone or something might be listening from the shadows. "It will be just the two of you here. Good luck. I'll be back in the morning." With that, the woman slammed the door shut. Casey heard the key turn in the lock with an ominous clunk of old metal. They were alone, locked in the darkness. Just them and the dead. The Voices from Beyond, a bite-sized fright. This series contains disturbing content. Listener discretion is advised. Casey and Alice switched on their flashlights. They were standing in the lobby of the hotel. It was richly decorated but distinctly old-fashioned, all dark wood and brass fixtures. Casey felt as though she had just stepped back in time 50 years or more. It was eerily quiet in the old building. All they could hear was the soft creaking of timbers as the hotel leant into the wind, and their own slightly nervous breathing. A thick carpet muffled their footsteps as the two women moved deeper into the hotel, the beams from their flashlights scything through the darkness. They crept along shadowy corridors and through empty, silent bedrooms. Sometimes it seemed as though they could hear soft, slow footsteps following them. The pair would come to an abrupt halt, listening intently as the gentle, shuffling feet would take a few more steps in their direction, then fall ominously silent. In some of the bedrooms, Casey could swear that she heard faint, muffled voices, whispering in the dark, the occasional disembodied giggle of a small child, or the distant murmurings of quiet conversation. The two women shone their flashlights into every corner of these whispering rooms. Shadows leapt and danced across the walls. There was no sign of life. Casey and Alice pressed on. From the depths of the hotel they heard the creaking of doors, slowly opening and closing. As they moved onto a curving staircase, Casey felt a hand on her shoulder. She wheeled around, her flashlight beam slicing through the shadows like a saber. There was no one there. Just a lingering cold in the air, and a sick feeling of dread in her stomach. Overhead, Casey could hear the shuffling footsteps of several pairs of feet, walking through the corridors of the floor above. The soft, hissing whispers seemed louder here, flowing around the pair like invisible smoke. Alice glanced at Casey and nodded. This was the place. They began to rummage through their bags, fishing out handfuls of complex equipment, cables, and spare batteries. Casey produced a small electronic voice recorder. The two women sat down on the richly carpeted stairs, careful not to make a sound. to disturb the air. Casey pressed the record button. The chilling audio you have just heard was recorded in 2007 by the Central New York Ghost Hunters, a paranormal investigation team. They had been invited to visit an old hotel in upstate New York to investigate the numerous ghostly incidents and unexplained phenomena reported by both guests and staff. The name of the hotel has never been revealed, in order to protect its reputation. Though the investigators reported hearing disembodied footsteps and whispering voices whilst exploring the building, particularly in the stairwell where they chose to set up their equipment, it wasn't until they left the hotel and played their recordings back that the full horror was revealed. As you heard, the recording is punctuated by a series of harrowing screams, running footsteps, and numerous male voices, sometimes bellowing with anger or shouting for help. The team sent to investigate the hotel was entirely female, and there were no guests or staff in the building that night. There was no clock, either, to have made that rhythmic ticking that underlines the whole recording. The microphone was reportedly left completely still during the whole event, so it should not have picked up the ominous rumbling or interference that fluctuates throughout the audio. The hotel was rumored to have a dark, rather violent history, which might partially explain the restless spirits supposedly caught on tape there. These strange occurrences, voices and sounds that are not normally audible to the human ear being captured via recording devices, are known as electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. These voices are believed to be those of the dead, spirits either trapped in an eternal loop or attempting to communicate with the living. The captured sounds can include disembodied voices, ghostly footsteps, the noises of animals or machinery not present in the room, and the desperate struggles of murders from the distant past. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of EVP recordings available online, though this one from the unnamed New York hotel is by far the longest, and perhaps the most chilling. The vast majority of reported EVP cases are admittedly unclear and difficult to make out, while many can be explained away by perfectly natural external noises or overactive imaginations. However, there are some that may cause even a hardened skeptic to take a step back and certainly send a shiver down one's spine. In some recordings, the EVP appears to be captured fragments of conversation, perhaps a brief snapshot of a deceased person's life, where it seems as if those speaking are unaware of the presence of the investigators. In others, they could be interpreted as attempted communication with loved ones, as the spirit of a family member reaching out, trying to send a message of comfort or of everlasting affection. Some EVP recordings have a far more disturbing aura to them. The voices that seem to be crying out for help, pleading with a desperation born of being ignored for so long, such as this segment from the New York recording, where a voice seems to beg, "Lord, help me." Or this one, reportedly captured on board the ocean liner, the Queen Mary, rumored to be one of the most haunted ships of all time. In this recording, it seems as though a young girl calls out, "Hello," twice before being answered by the investigators, then cries, "Help us." In this particularly unsettling clip, captured in the empty bathroom of an abandoned mental facility in Utah, a woman can seemingly be heard begging for help, telling us that she can't breathe. A male voice appears to answer before we hear splashing water, as though someone is being drowned. The thought that this could be the final moments of some poor soul forced to relive their death over and over is a disturbing one indeed. This clip is eerily reminiscent of the classic 80s horror movie, The Changeling, in which a terrifying seance is held to communicate with the spirit of a young boy, drowned by his father in a bathtub. There are also EVP recordings with a far more aggressive tone. Spirits that are openly hostile, seemingly screaming at paranormal investigators to get out, or leave whatever location they are exploring. Or those that won't let death get in the way of their apparent unfinished business. In this EVP case, recorded in an old cinema in Manchester, England, a chilling male voice seems to let us know that he is not done here, whatever that may mean. Or this one, captured in the abandoned Goldfield Hotel in Nevada, long rumored a hotspot for violent paranormal occurrences. In this clip, an investigator is asking if any spirits in the building were responsible for pelting a previous ghost hunting team with bricks, in what appeared to be a case of aggressive poltergeist activity. We clearly hear a disembodied voice respond, "We didn't mean to hurt anybody." The chilling nature of this particular recording became even more horrifying when it emerged that the investigators who captured it, a married couple, died shortly after the incident in a tragic and bloody murder-suicide. Perhaps most disturbing of all are the cases when the voices seem not to know or refuse to believe that they are dead, such as in this recording, captured in an old abandoned hospital in California. In this clip, a faint voice seems to reply to the investigators' questions with a whispered, "We're not dead." In one highly unsettling case, a team of paranormal investigators exploring a supposedly haunted house in the south of England were using an EMF monitor to check for spiritual activity. These devices measure changes in electromagnetic frequency, often believed to be the signs of ghosts or other paranormal activity. These investigators managed to establish communication with what they believe to be the spirit of a woman who has been haunting the property and tormenting the elderly residents. However, this spirit claims that it is not she who is dead, but that it is the living in the house who are indeed deceased, and the ones haunting her. She considers them all to be evil intruders who have invaded her home, reveals that she is terribly scared, and asks them all to leave her in peace. Perhaps this is just a restless spirit in denial about her own demise, or maybe these cases point to something even stranger. It has been hypothesized that all reports of EVP, ghostly sightings, disembodied voices, and other paranormal activity are in fact communications from people in alternate dimensions, or a parallel universe bleeding through into our own. Perhaps they are trying to contact us through various devices, as paranormal investigators try to do with the spirits of those long dead. Or maybe we pick up on fragmented pieces of static from each other's worlds, like a radio tuned halfway between two stations. Whatever these disturbing voices from beyond may be, the desire to communicate with the spirits of the dead is not a recent phenomenon. People have been trying to converse with loved ones that have passed on to the other side for centuries. In ancient times, shamans, mystics, and priests would ingest intoxicating substances, trying to reach a trance-like state in order to communicate with their ancestors and seek guidance for the future. In the 1800s, a spiritualist craze swept Victorian Britain. Psychics and mediums were in huge demand. They would lead candlelit seances where those wishing to talk to deceased relatives would sit in a hushed circle, awaiting a sign from beyond. In some of the more sensational reported seances, mediums would sometimes appear to levitate off the ground or vomit up great clouds of ghostly ectoplasm. Furniture would rattle and shake, mysterious scratchings and knockings would be heard. Sometimes pale, disembodied hands would appear, floating in the darkness and reaching out to the terrified participants. This newfound obsession with the occult and spiritualism quickly spread to the United States. Mary Todd, the wife of President Abraham Lincoln, became a firm believer in the supernatural. She was reportedly visited by the spirits of Presidents Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, and John Tyler whilst living in the White House. She attended numerous seances in an attempt to communicate with her deceased son, William. It is believed that President Lincoln himself was present at some of these spiritual summonings. Some of the greatest minds in recent history have pondered the notion of speaking with the dead. Renowned scientists Marie Curie and Heinrich Hertz both attended seances and believed that the spiritual world may have had some effect on their research into radioactive elements and radio waves, respectively. Thomas Edison, perhaps one of the most influential inventors of all time, credited with the development of the light bulb, the automatic telegraph machine, and the precursors to modern storage batteries, telephone transmitters, and film cameras, took things a step further. In 1920, Edison was quoted in the American magazine as saying, "I have been at work for some time, building an apparatus to see if it is possible for personalities which have left this earth to communicate with us." It has long been rumored that Edison did in fact construct this invention, a so-called ghost box, used to amplify the voices of the dead. If he did so, however, it is now long lost, and no prototypes or designs have ever been discovered. His dreams live on in the thousands of modern-day paranormal investigators that explore abandoned buildings in the dead of night, hunting for elusive communications from the places beyond. What do you think? Are the dead trying to speak to us? Are these disturbing examples of EVP really the voices of those who have passed on, or perhaps snatched glimpses into a parallel universe, a mirror image of our own? Or are they just workings of our imaginations, fueled by our desperate desire to discover something, any sort of proof of a world beyond our own? It is impossible to know for certain. But for any of you planning on asking questions in the darkness, do take care. You may not enjoy the answers you receive. We would love to hear your own thoughts and ideas about these eerie electronic phenomena. If you have enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pixel Elixir, and subscribe at bitesizedfrights.com to ensure that you never miss any of our terrifying tales. This has been a Pixel Elixir production, narrated by Chris K. Thank you for listening. Until the next bite, my friends.